Tasmanian Museum and Art Gallery and another Facebook Live mystery tour. I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge and pay respect to the First Nations community, the Tasmanian Aboriginal community, who are the traditional owners and continued custodians of the land that we're on, and to pay respect to the elders past and present and those emerging. Now, usually we're on Muwinina land when we're on the city site, but we've come across the river to the eastern shore to Rosny, to the collection stores, and this side of the river is Muwinina land, a whole different nation and culture for First Nations people. We're in the collection store, the zoology collection store, and we're going to meet our special guest, who is the vertebrate zoology collection manager. So follow me down this way. So this is Belinda. Hi, Belinda.
Hi,
Belinda's
Richard.
The collection manager of vertebrate zoology.
Vertebrate zoology. So I look after all the mammals, birds, fish, reptiles and amphibians. So preparing them, cataloguing them and looking after the specimens already in the collection. But today we thought we'd have a little bit of a look at a small slice of what we do here, which is the cetacean collection. So
that'll be a big slice then.
That's right, haha. So cetacean is just a scientific word that refers to the group of animals that include whales, dolphins and porpoises. And we have a significant collection here at TMAG. We have over 5,000 specimens. And everything from big articulated display skeletons, skulls, partial skeletons, teeth. We have wet preserved specimens of eyeballs and organs, all the way down to tiny little pieces of blubber and skin, which we keep at ultra low temperature for genetics work. So it's a big collection.
Wow. Can I just ask, I have to ask, why do we keep whale eyeballs?
As part of the necropsy, sometimes there might be something interesting about them, and so we keep lots of bits and pieces.
And the necropsy is like the autopsy for the dead animal? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so the reason that we have such a big collection here is because Tasmania is a global hotspot for whale strandings. We have a real high number of mass strandings and single strandings, but what's particularly interesting about the Tasmanian context is the diversity of species we get around here. So like the different types of whales that we have stranding here is quite interesting.
Excellent. What are we going to look at first?
I don't know, we're making this up as we go. So this is the store here. This is where we keep our medium to small cetaceans. Here, this is our medium beaked whale, toothed whales. Over here, we have our small cetaceans, so our dolphins and porpoises. And over there we have our small baleen whales, pygmy rights and some smaller humpbacks. Any of the bigger material that we have is actually kept off-site at a warehouse at Moona. So we have 5-metre sperm whale skulls and big chunks of southern right whale skulls and things. And I think what I should probably point out is that there's 2 types of whales. We have baleen whales and toothed whales, and part of the toothed whale group is also the beaked whales. And Tasmania gets a lot of interesting species of beaked whales washing up here, many of which we only know from stranded records, and they're very rarely seen in the wild. So any animals that turn up are a really important opportunity to get as much information as we can about the biology of really elusive species of beaked whales.
So what's the main difference between those 2 types of whales then?
Yep, okay, so toothed whales feed with teeth. So like dolphins and things, they have a set of teeth on the top and the bottom. The baleen whales have this kind of structure here made of keratin, which acts like a big moustache on the top jaw, and they take big gulps of water and then use this to filter feed, to strain the krill. So it gets caught on this really fluffy stuff on the inside here, and they use their giant tongue to lick the krill off here. This is from a piece of minke whale.
So keratin's the same substance that our hair and fingernails are made
Yep.
of, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
And this was used a lot in the days of whaling for making things like corsets and things like that.
Because it's strong and light, flexible,
Yep.
like the plastic.
Yep, definitely.
Wow, that's an amazing specimen.
Yep. And whales are obviously mammals, so they're warm-blooded and they breathe air, and they've come up with some pretty cool adaptations for living in a marine environment. So we have noses on the front of our face, but with whales, they've migrated to the top of their head with blowholes. So you can see in the top of whale skulls, you'll have these holes here, which is where the blowholes pop out.
Mm-hmm. So they don't have to get their whole head out of the water.
No,
to
they just
breathe,
have to
they
pop
can-
up and
yep.
down to breathe.
Mhm.
Another interesting adaptation, and things we get people bringing these in often, well, not often, occasionally, as a mystery object, which you can feel is really quite heavy and dense.
It's like a strange misformed piece of pottery or something.
It is, and it's really heavy, right?
Yeah, it's
really
really heavy.
dense. So this is a whale ear bone, and because whales don't have ear canals, so they don't have any kind of like external holes for hearing,
Yep.
they have this really heavy bone instead of a thin membrane for an eardrum. They have this really heavy thing here. So during echolocation, they'll send out clicks and sounds from their melon and then receive those back. The melon, it's a fruit. No, I'm kidding. It's that big kind of bulbous part on the front of toothed whales that's full of like this jelly-like substance.
Okay.
And they receive the sound back, not through ear holes like we've got, back up the jawbone. And you'll see in toothed whales, they have this hollow cavity inside their jawbones, which is filled with like a jelly, fatty-like material, which helps conduct the sound back to the ear bones, where they kind of sit at the back of the jaw here.
Oh, wow.
So that's kind of a cool mystery object
Yeah.
that people bring in all the time.
I've heard of the ear bones before, but I had no idea why they were important or how they used them.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So I've just got a bunch of stuff out here. Some stuff that people will often find on beaches.
Uh-huh.
This is one of the things that gets brought in a lot too, that people will find on the beach and say, what is that? And what this is a plate that connects to the whale's vertebrae. And usually on a grown animal, this would fuse on and become solid with the vertebrae. The fact that this has fallen off means that this was off a young animal. So you can see the size of that. That's probably off a sperm whale, a juvenile sperm whale. Blue whales and things are bigger again.
Yeah.
So that's quite interesting. I've gone completely off script.
Are they from the sperm whale too?
Yeah, so this is
Massive.
they are, and this was quite an interesting animal actually, because it stranded in 2013 on Anthony's Beach. It was a big bull adult male sperm whale, which was 18 metres. We did a necropsy on the beach, so I had a look at why it stranded. But it was too big to move, so we left it there, and eventually the sea creatures and the weather eroded it down, and we had to get the army in to help us move the whale skull, which was about 5 metres long, to bring it down, because it was quite an important specimen in terms of its size. We rarely get really big males like that turning up. And the other good thing about sperm whale teeth is that you can cut them in half like this, and you can count the rings to determine the age of the animal when it died. And this was a midlife sort of animal, so it was about 40 years old.
Wow.
Sperm whales live to about 70.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And the jaw and the skull we have of this, which is out at Moona, so
Yeah.
one day it would be great to put the teeth back into the jaw and maybe have it on display sometime.
Yeah.
Who knows?
One idea. What's that? What are What's that funny little thing in there?
This here, well, this is quite interesting actually. So all whales have a bone like this, and it sits at the back of the animal near the tail, and it doesn't attach to the skeleton. It sits embedded in the muscle, and for a long time the common kind of thought was that it was a vestigial hind limb, that it was a non-functional remnant of when whales had 4 legs. And while it is still evidence of that, it's a whale pelvis, there's been more recent research to show that it's not vestigial, it has a function, and it's quite important in reproduction of whales.
Yeah. Wow.
And they're different sizes and different shapes, they're really varied. This one here is from a pilot whale, but in things like southern right whales, they get quite large.
Yeah.
I've actually just listed some interesting stuff out of the compost where I prepare stuff. Do you want to come and have a look?
Yeah, let's have a look.
All right, let's come on. So we're heading down here. This is the fossil collection over here in these compactors. In this side here is our vertebrate store, which has got most of our taxidermy and study skins. Invertebrates is down that way. But we're heading to the working heart, to the labs.
When you say compost, like
Compost, like, you know, when you chuck your scraps and stuff into a big pile and it composts down, you put it on the garden, just like that. But I use mushroom compost. I used to use horse poo, but there's been some work done, and the Australian Museum are using mushroom compost, so I jumped on the mushroom compost bandwagon, and it works really well. So with these animals here, which we just lifted out of the compost yesterday, these weren't flensed at all, so that means I didn't cut any meat off it. I just put them in, covered them up with mushroom compost, came back a year later, and they're completely clean. The 2 species that we've got here today, and these aren't completely prepared, these will need a bit of a wash and a clean still. This one here is a shepherd's beaked whale, which stranded in February last year. It was alive, and then it died after efforts to release it again. Shepherd's beaked whales are only known from about 40 strandings worldwide. They've only been seen in the wild like a handful of times. So any material we've got of shepherd's beaked whale is particularly significant. And this is a juvenile female animal. You can tell it's a juvenile because the skull hasn't ossified, hasn't fused together particularly well.
all right, just like a baby skull.
Just like in a baby skull.
Maybe human.
And when we put when I put this in the compost, I couldn't feel any teeth in it at all. But as it's composted down, there were teeth in the top jaw and the bottom jaw. And here I've got them laid out in order, so hopefully I'll be able to glue them back into place after this preparation's finished. And with some beaked whales, the teeth in females don't erupt at all. So they'll have, yeah, exactly. They'll be in the jawbone, but they don't necessarily pop out, which kind of suggests that in beaked whales, the teeth aren't necessarily for feeding. They're more of a secondary sexual characteristic about fighting, but also mate selection. So the bigger the teeth, the probably the sexier you are.
The males might use them to fight with or just to show off.
Yeah, just to show off. Yeah.
So if the females don't have any teeth that come out, what do they actually eat? Like, because you showed that, was it a dolphin along there with
lots of little teeth? Yep.
Catch fish and whatever. How do these catch food?
Yeah, the beaked whales are quite kooky because they're almost in between the true, like the dolphins and killer whales and toothed whales like that, and the Mysticetes, the baleen whales. They have like grooves under their throat which can expand, and they can go around like a vacuum cleaner. This is my whale nose here, and they can suck in fish, mostly squid and other kind of soft-bodied invertebrates. And then when an animal strands, we can cut it open, have a look inside its stomach, and work out the dietary contents. And a lot of beaked whales tend to have lots and lots of squid beaks and things in it.
You talked about flensing before.
Yes.
So what do you actually, when you get to a whale stranding, what gear do you need? What sort of stuff do you take?
Well, we usually, like something like this would be used to gear like this. So this is just a big sharpened blade on a hockey stick, which you can use to cut the head off or cut into the side of the animal, take off any extra kind of flesh that if you're preparing a skeleton you don't want on there. This is quite a good blubber hook. So you can kind of hook the blubber and pull it back and peel it and cut as you go. Knife and fork sort of thing. And there's lots of reasons that whales strand, and I think that's a really important thing to realise, that there's no one reason, that each stranding is unique, and it might be that it's a case of misadventure, or it might be a case that one animal is sick and the others have followed it in. But in the case of Tasmania, there's particular areas that act as whale traps that have complex coastal topography. So there's been records of whales stranding like at the mouth of the Duck River, for instance, or on Ocean Beach for hundreds of years.
Right. Yeah,
So
people say that their echolocation bounces off the beach and they can't hear it coming back. Or
yeah, it might be really kind of deep areas that then kind of go into really shallow surf zones where their echolocation gets a bit confused. And it's mostly toothed whales that will mass strand, and that's probably because they have really close social pods.
Right, okay. Yeah. So if one goes, a whole bunch.
Yeah, a whole bunch will kind of head up together on the beach. Baleen whales usually strand singularly. And last year, actually, up near Devonport, there was a sei whale stranding, which was quite interesting. It's the only second time that sei whales have been recorded around Tasmania, and that was a big animal, and the skull is buried on site up there. So we'll put together a bit of a mission to go and dig it up from up there.
And what's this other one?
This little guy also came out of the Compost. It's stranded around the same time as this one, so in early 2019. And this is a pygmy sperm whale. So pygmy sperm whales kind of look a bit like a mini sperm whale, but they only get a few metres long.
It's a really strange shape, the head, and it's
Yeah.
really asymmetrical. Like, is that just the way the blowhole is?
Yeah, so that big hole there is where the blowhole kind of comes out there.
Yeah.
And you can see,
So one side's got that and coming up, and then the other side of the skull's in a different shape. So
yeah, that's right. And this area here would have been full of that melon, that echolocating organ there.
yeah.
And the ear bones here have a different shape again, smaller, have fallen out here. They would have sat at the back here.
They look like little mushrooms.
They do. I mean, compared to the big ones that we were looking at before from right whales, there's a real diversity of shapes of ear bones, and if you find an ear bone, often you can work out what species it is because they're all a little bit different.
And then all these little funny teeth, are they from that?
Yeah, they're from this guy here. So pygmy sperm whales don't have teeth on the top jaw. They only have teeth on the bottom jaw. And here's one I didn't prepare earlier. It's like from a long time ago. But they have these little tiny sharp fish grasping teeth that they can throw things back.
So that's more like a dolphin's teeth, isn't it? Like
Yeah.
it's not a jellyfish sucker-inner like this one.
That's right.
Fish grabber.
What's interesting about this species too is it's mostly a tropical, subtropical species, and in the last 5 or 6 years we've had a real increase of the number of this species and other warm water species turning up down here in Tasmania. So because of our proximity to the Southern Ocean, we get a lot of these beaked whales that like the cold, deep kind of nutrient upwellings, but we also are starting to see different species turning up down here, like Risso's dolphins and pygmy sperm whales and things like that.
You mentioned really early on about the diversity of whale species in Tassie, so we're kind of on that crossover between cold and
warm now. Yeah, definitely. Yep.
And did you want to show us something in the fridge?
Oh yeah. So I mentioned earlier that part of our collection is the frozen material. So along with collecting as much skeletal material, what's really important now is from every stranded animal that a piece of tissue is taken. So we keep those in -80 freezers, which are like this. So you have boxes and boxes of specimens in tiny little vials with just a little piece of skin from every animal. And we have 2 -80 freezers here, and just the way that that scientists use museum collections are changing. Traditionally, we kept skins and skeletons or just skulls of material for people to come and look at, but with the increased availability of doing genetics, like it's cheaper, the technology's better and more accurate. Museums are now starting to collect tissues as part of their regime for documenting biodiversity, and that's really actively used by the research community. Yeah.
That's been amazing, Belinda. Thank you so much for sharing
That's
your
okay.
knowledge and some of the collection with us. It's great to see behind the scenes. Thanks again. Thanks, Kat, for filming. And thanks for joining us. And please join us again next Wednesday for another TMA Live Facebook tour. See you then.